Hi, so I'm Natasi Rodriguez, and today we're here doing a Beam chat with Ethan Saeta, who works at IXL Learning, an ed tech company based out of the peninsula. And he is a software engineer there and also a Stanford alum, class of 2013, BS in symbolic systems. So welcome, Ethan.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I want to start off just hearing about, so you did go to Stanford, and a lot of our viewers can probably identify with different organizations you've been involved in. So I was curious, what things did you do on campus when you were here?
Yeah, so I have to admit that I was a SLE kid, so I ended up doing that my freshman year, and then being a writing tutor for the SLE program my junior and senior years. I was also involved in Res Ed, and I was an RCC in Alondra my junior year, and an RA in Alondra my senior year. So pretty tied to East Flow. And then I also participated in the Ultimate community. So I was on the men's Ultimate B team, and then I even captained it my junior year as well. So yeah, and then I also studied abroad in Beijing the spring quarter of my sophomore year. So
great, yeah. Sounds like you were busy. Did you have any favorite things to do on campus or places to go?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, intramural fields were nice, good for practice, good for getting out, getting some air. I also liked the area out by what is now formerly Meyer, but going to Coupa there and just being able to sit outside was pretty nice. Although, admittedly, it didn't have the external monitor that I used a lot when I was in my room. So.
Yeah. Cool. So I wanted to ask, but how did you hear about IXL Learning initially?
Yeah, so I originally heard about IXL Learning through the Ultimate Frisbee team. Some alums who were a couple years ahead of me ended up starting work at IXL, and it really intrigued me that it was ed tech. I also ended up seeing them at a couple of career fairs, and so just started to get involved that way. I think I saw them at the career fair my junior year and then also my senior year. And so senior year is when I applied and started working here after that.
Okay. Had you originally envisioned yourself going into ed tech in that field?
Yeah, so a little bit of background about myself. My father is a physics professor at Harvey Mudd College, and my mom is a math teacher at the local high school where I grew up. And my older brother currently works at Coursera. So pretty involved in education and technology already. So those are really big priorities, things that I value a lot. So definitely wanted to work in ed tech. Due to some sibling rivalry, I'm not sure I could work with him too effectively at Coursera, and I didn't want to work as a direct competitor to him because I think that would be too much sibling rivalry as well. So I was really happy to find IXL Learning because I think they do a lot of really good work, and they work with teachers, and it's to help a lot of elementary school kids and up through high school. So I think that was a really useful place to put some effort.
Yeah, that's great. So your job there is as a software engineer. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and what your typical day looks like?
So I've had a couple of different roles here. I started out as a software engineer on the content team for English language arts. So if you don't know anything about IXL, you can basically think of our product as an online workbook. So it's a whole bunch of practice problems in various different subjects. And they are procedurally generated, so it never runs out. You get instant feedback with not just whether you got it correct or incorrect, but if you got it incorrect, then what are the steps to get it correct, and what are some things to think about to help you understand. So it's not really teaching so much as it's trying to help make sure students understand the concepts and solidify their understanding through practice. So when I started, which was a week after graduation in 2013, we were working on getting our English language arts out, which ended up releasing in September of that year. So yeah, when I started making little snippets of code that would do this procedural generation so that we could have virtually limitless practice problems. So students can keep practicing and understanding without ever repeating questions.
Great. And so are you still working on that? It sounded like maybe you changed.
Yeah, I switched. So I was on that team for around 8 months-ish. Is that correct? Yeah, and then, no, sorry, a year and a few months. And then in August of 2014, I ended up switching to a new product called Sugarcane, which ended up releasing this past February. So it's very, very new still. And that one is more of a build your own adventure of education. So whereas the content team that I was working on before got to use a lot of frameworks that were built up for the math product, which has been around since 2008. This new product was just, there were 4 engineers and no existing code. And so it was starting from scratch and learning a lot of stuff that I didn't even touch on when I was at Stanford. Since I was a symbolic systems major, I didn't take a databases course and I didn't take some of the other computer science things, although my concentration was artificial intelligence. So I took 229, I took 221, I took a whole bunch of computer science courses. There were some parts that I didn't touch on, and this has really helped me move into those. But the product itself, now that it's been at least built to version 1.0 or 0.9, depending on your perspective, is some place where you can go and create or upload a data set, which is just like an Excel spreadsheet or any sort of 2D array, depending on how you like to look at things. And then you can create activities based off of that. So a very easy example would be something like, I want to study vocabulary for my Chinese class. So I'll have a whole bunch of Chinese characters in one column and a whole bunch of their Chinese pronunciations in another and their English translations in another. And then make either 3-dimensional flashcards or make a matching game or make an associating game or something like that. If you were doing something maybe for history and you wanted to have a whole bunch of events and a whole bunch of dates, there are different activities where you put them in order chronologically or however else you'd like to sort it. So that one it's not quite as geared towards a specific grade level because we're not providing the content for that. And we're hoping that means that anybody who's interested in anything can use it to study anything.
So what's a typical day look like for you? Or a typical week, if that's an easier time point to think about?
Sure. So every week I meet with my manager twice. Well, that's not entirely the same way. Once is a one-on-one where we meet for an hour and we go over how the projects are going, what are pitfalls, what we should move on next, and look at the bigger picture as well. The other time in the week is just a quick 15-minute check-in that the entire team does together. So we're not quite a Scrum Agile environment, but we do have weekly quick check-ins so that everybody knows what everybody else on the team is doing. This works particularly well for my newer team since there's only 4 of us in it, so everybody can kind of keep tabs on everybody else. But then there's usually some bit of recruiting or interviews. I usually give about 2 interviews a week. And usually those are on the phone, but sometimes they're in-person interviews. And the rest of the time is spent coding with, maybe a meeting or 2. So a lot of it is spent actually working on the code base. Depending on the project you're working on, though, you might not actually be writing lines of code. You might be just doing designs or reviewing other people's code. So that depends a little bit based on the project, but a lot of it is, yeah, they do a really good job of keeping the meetings to a minimum.
So what would you say is the most exciting part, in your opinion, of your work?
To me, the most exciting part is releasing code out into the world. So I mentioned that I started in June on the language arts project, and then in September it released. And so working on something for 3 months and then releasing it and having 30% of our 5 million user base sign up for that product was really, really exciting, especially since at that point I had written 30% of the generators. So basically what I then thought was, okay, well, 5 million, and then you take 30% of that, and you take 30% of that, and that's like I've impacted so many people already, which was a really, really gratifying experience. And then more recently with the release of Sugarcane, it was really exciting to see something that I've worked on for about 2 years at that point finally come and go live, and I can now share it with my family, my grandparents, and things like that. And so it's still at the early stages of it, where we haven't yet started aggressively marketing it. But I'm excited to watch the Google Analytics grow as more and more people discover it and start to use it.
Very cool. And where do you think IXL is expanding next? It sounds like there are lots of new projects coming up on a regular basis.
Yeah, so IXL as a company has a lot of different ways that it can move forward, and a lot of things that have been outlined already. So some things that we're very interested in doing is expanding to more subjects right now. So when I started, it was just math out, and then I helped create language arts, and then since then, social studies and science have also been added. Going forward, there are going to be more subjects, which I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk about which ones yet, but definitely coming forward with more subjects, as well as fleshing out more grade levels within each of the subjects we already offer. I think it's pretty clear that if you make a multiple choice component or a fill in the blank component, you can make a bunch of different problems that are just multiple choice and fill in the blank. But that's not really exciting to a lot of students. So another big push that we're doing is trying to figure out much more interactive ways to test the material that you couldn't easily do with pen and paper, right? So if we're trying to replace a workbook, but we now have the advantage of all this technology, like what can we do with it? And so already we're seeing a lot of movements into graphing and doing like logic-based proofs and things like that, where you're able to really leverage the power of a computer to make the process much more interactive and much more engaging for the students. So yeah, there's pushes both in expanding, but then also in refining what we have and making it more powerful and more engaging.
Great. And do you have any advice for current students if they're interested in getting into the field of ed tech or into working at IXL in particular?
Yeah, so I would definitely, well, first of all, keep studying. Second of all, actually prepare for your interviews. So as somebody who gives 2-hour-long interviews a week, it's kind of crazy to me how often I come across somebody who has a fabulous resume, and you can tell that they, at least at some level, understand a lot of computer science, but they list Java on their application, and we use Java for the most part in most of our products here. But they haven't really done anything with Java in the past year or two, right? If you took 106A and you're like, oh, I have Java, like I remember Carol, like we got this, but then you haven't really taken a refresher on it. You don't know the syntax, you don't remember all the things you need to declare, then it really, really hurts an interviewer's opinion of you during it. So I would make sure that you brush up on those things, as well as algorithms are always great. Also, really show that you're passionate about education. I'm pretty sure that a non-insignificant part of my getting this job at IXL was because I was a SLE writing tutor, and that demonstrated that I was really interested in education as well as English language arts, which is the position that I ended up getting. So I would say if you're really looking to get into ed tech, make sure that you demonstrate that passion for education, as well as make sure you're a solid technical candidate.
Okay, and looking back on your experience when you were first going to the application process, is there anything you wish you would have known then, or experiences you wish you'd had before entering the workforce?
Yeah, so before coming to IXL, I had done one technical internship the summer between my junior and senior years. And that gave me a really good idea that I did not want to remain at that company. So definitely doing internships and finding what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and what sort of things matter more than you might have initially thought. That's definitely a good thing to do, as well as just start applying early. When I remember when I was applying, I applied for this job at the beginning of winter quarter. There's a career fair, technical career fair, and that's where I started interacting and trying to get jobs. But increasingly, I've seen a trend where more and more candidates start applying in fall, early fall, late fall, early winter, and then after that point, it gets much more difficult. It's not impossible. So if you're still interested, by all means, continue applying. because we'll take new people all the time. We have a lot of stuff lined up, and we need more engineers in order to actually get it done. But the earlier you can get a jump on it, the better.
Okay, and just briefly, could you tell us about the application process? You mentioned that you're a part of some of the interviews, but what are the steps before and after that for applicants?
Yeah, so it changes a little bit applicant to applicant, but if we end up receiving your resume from a career fair or online, if you submit it, then we end up getting you in the system, and depending on how many career fairs and different things we're going to, our recruiters have varying levels of mountains of resumes to crawl through. But eventually, I guess going from that point until a completely successful hire job offer letter, you would be contacted by them and then set up a 30-minute phone interview. And this is just to get a little bit of a feel for you to get a little bit of a better feel for us, and some technical questions, but not too heavy. Assuming that goes well, you'll have a second job interview or technical interview, and that's an hour long. And so that one you get into much more real life coding experiences, or if not real life, then abstracted from real life, but still derived from there. And you also will receive a take-home job test. And those can actually happen in either order, the second phone interview and the job test. And then assuming that goes well, you'll either get a third phone interview, or we'll bring you on site and you'll have some technical interviews here in the office. You'll get to meet some people. And then after that, you should hear from us and get your offer letter. And the timing between each of those steps is usually about a week and a half to 2 weeks, just so that we can get things back and process them, and then set up the next time slot that's available for everybody.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing. Before we sign off, I just wanted to ask, so if there are any students who are interested in applying to IXL, where would they find out information on internships or job opportunities? Yeah,
so we have a bunch of them almost always available. Like I said, we're just basically waiting around for more engineers to contact us, which is not to say that we don't have applicants, but we really do screen pretty thoroughly for people who are going to help out in the long term. So at ixl.com/careers or ixl.com/jobs, I think both redirect to the same thing. You can probably also email recruiting@ixl.com and send them your resume and cover letter if you want, and they'll get in touch. And so we have a whole bunch of different listings on the IXL site, and I would assume that since this is going towards Stanford, a lot of people would be looking for either internships or the new grad position. But there's also things like mobile engineer and backend engineer, data scientist, and things like that. If you're unsure if any of them, or which one exactly fits you best, feel free to apply to just any of them and make a note for our recruiter, and they'll help get you sorted. And even then, it's not that you're set in stone, that you're going to do exactly one thing from the very beginning of your application. During the interview process, we'll talk about different teams, and you'll get to give your input on which one sounds more exciting to you, when you can hear a little bit more and interact with people and ask questions, as well as in my experience, if you want to switch teams to learn more, or if you're unhappy with one team, then they're pretty accommodating with that as well. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing, for taking the time out to speak with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.